reiterations, clarifications, and announcements. After my last video, some people brought up some good points I'd like to address, and I need to clarify a few things. But first, just some general announcements. I won't be using the Dozzy voice anymore. I find it far too monotone, and I prefer this voice. I think it's the one people most identify me with. Also, I apologize for the 2-hour video. I know for the past month I haven't made many videos, and the ones I have been rather long. It's just that I spent a couple of months on YouTube inserting philosophical tidbits and humor into the 15-minute time limit, never really able to get out where I stand and what I believe. My future plans are to return to basics. I want to shoot for the 15-minute feminist ponage videos. I also want to start doing some cartoons. I'm thinking about a cartoon series called The Swedes, where I basically make fun of life in Sweden under feminist tyranny. Or perhaps I will just do random skits, but either way I want to start doing some cartoons. The next thing I want to do is a series where my narrator Kate has her own series, Girl Talk with Kate. The cartoon and Kate series will be more like reoccurring things, whereas the majority of my channel will remain focused on my usual feminist ponage videos. Also, if you have Twitter, follow me on Twitter at razor_b_candy. I never tweet anything of any importance, but I like being random, and it may help me to connect with my audience. Now let's get to the comments. First is a good point brought up by Carol Geist, and forgive me, I have no idea how that is supposed to be pronounced.
What if one of your goals in life as a man is to have and raise children? Having a wife, or the non-married equivalent, who can agree with you to be a stay-at-home mom seems to me a better deal than having her work in order to pay for daycare so someone else can raise your children most of the week. I see merit in your arguments, but the aspect of a woman staying at home to take care of the children as purely parasitical is false in my opinion. Raising children is hard work. I'm not saying it's the most difficult thing out there. Hell, I'm gonna be an architect, and sitting at a desk and looking at how other people work isn't exactly mind-boggling either. But I'm riffing on the fact that if you require someone to work to afford daycare, you are outsourcing something that can be done for free, but instead 2 more people are paying taxes for it and a stranger is spending most of the time with your kid. It's an economic mess.
He brings up a good point. I state that stay-at-home housewives are living a parasitic lifestyle. He claims it's not fair to call that lifestyle parasitic. He cites that these women raise children, and otherwise would have to hire a babysitter to outsource what she herself can do. Well, the first argument is the outsourcing of labor. The financial pull of a well-educated and trained woman will far exceed the cost of a babysitter, so one could make the argument that a babysitter is like a secretary. Sure, the boss could get his own coffee and lunch and make his own phone calls, but it pays better to focus on the big deals and have the secretary do the light work. Then there is the argument that babysitters cannot give the proper moral guidance to the children and the necessary bonding time, and this is true, but at the same time, with children going to school all day and being raised by the school system, what few hours the kids get home while mommy's at work, I really don't think is going to make a difference. And as I said, the kids are at school all day, and what difference does a few years of daycare before kindergarten make? Now there are scenarios where a man and wife want to have a large family, and so every other year she's bringing a baby into this world for the first 10 years, so they have 5 or 6 kids, and because as one is old enough to go to school, the younger still needs a stay-at-home mom, and she's knocked up with another one on the way. Yes, this scenario does happen, and it would be completely unreasonable to expect her to hold a job and be an equal financial partner. However, what I have seen with my own eyes all my life, looks more like a 28-year-old woman with 2 kids. Both are in school. She sits home all day long in front of the TV, and talking on the phone to her gal pals. The kids come home from school, eat some microwaved food or a bowl of cereal in a self-sufficient manner, then they go to their bedrooms, watch TV, get on their iPods, ask mom if they can go over to their friend's house, and then she tosses something on a skillet real quick, something else in the microwave, and in an hour of work, dinner is done. She yells at the kids to get a few things picked up and done. The father comes home, they have the dinner, the kids clean the dishes, and there is just not a lot of interaction between parent and child. Ultimately, aside from tossing something in the microwave, and maybe doing laundry here and there, this woman will spend age 20 to 85 barely taking time out of her life to do anything other than TV and telephone, all of which is made possible by her husband's hard work and money. I dare say, when all is said and done, she has lived a parasitic lifestyle, has gotten a free ride. I see too many women in their late 30s and up, their oldest kid is left for college, they sit at home with their boyfriend or their third husband, they just have no responsibilities, sit around the house being lazy, only worked a few part-time jobs here and there, and for the most part, they're just parasites. The days of hard-working housewives who had to watch the children in time before daycare centers, television, dishwashers, microwaves, washing machines and vacuum cleaners, the days where women actually did do a lot of work are gone. But today, with all of this daycare center and public school, and iPods and DVDs to sit the toddlers in front of, all the modern conveniences to clean the house and fix dinner with no more than an hour total work per day, dare I say women seriously need to get off their asses and not pull this stay-at-home mum is the most difficult job in the world. And I know a lot of you are wanting to say but having babysitters and the school system raise your kids is not the ideal parenting scenario. Yes, I agree. But that's happening right now with stay-at-home mums. So why not get off her fucking ass and have a job? It really wouldn't deprive the children of much needed parental bonding than they're already deprived of by the stay-at-home and watch TV housewife.
You claim there's such a thing as the nature of woman, and yet routinely have to cabin that by saying, essentially, not really. Let me put it your asserted to be the case claim in a simple way for you to understand. X is the case for Y except for all of the times where X is false for Y. Therefore, X is the nature of Y.
As for integral math's mathematical equation with the X's and the Y's about how I define what a woman is, I think you are referring to me saying that feminism is female nature, female instinct, turned into a political movement, and then saying that I can still say women and then compare that to what I call a feminist, but when I do, I am defining these two things by their severity. If that is confusing or sounds contradictory, here is an example. 1. Hot versus cold. We use different words to describe the state of temperature. We accept that ice is cold, fire is hot, but we also say things like the water is hot when we step into a bath. However, if you were comparing it to boiling water, you'd claim the water is cold. An ice cube from your refrigerator is cold, until you compare it to liquid nitrogen. Temperature, no matter what extreme end of the spectrum, is still temperature. Feminism, female nature, is still a part of women. The degree can vary, and we can give different words to indicate the distance or level to and from any end of the spectrum, as we do with temperature calling it hot and cold. 2. Liar versus honest. We can refer to a person as being honest, or as being a liar. Deception is a part of being human. But some people tell little white lies here and there, maybe make up a few tall tales to tell the grandkids, but we refer to that person as being an honest person. Another man is a careful sociopathic liar that often deceives people in the most carefully crafted way, ultimately living a lifestyle of deception for profit. We often call them salesmen. But he too is a liar. But let us not forget that lies, that is deception, is a part of being human. It is not derived from any religion, subculture, ideology, or philosophy. It is part of human instinct. 3. Light versus dark. You either have darkness, the complete absence of light, or you have some light. That doesn't stop us from saying it's dark in here when there is some degree of light. I wish I could whip out numbers and X's and Y's, but I am no mathematician.
MGTOW by itself might actually change something? When I dream, it's of a fucking pony. A couple hundred not entirely socially adept guys on the internet who can't speak of a woman without calling her a bitch or a cunt and crying foul and playing victim of those bitches and cunts won't affect change in any system.
In that instance of the phrase MGTOW, I was referring to all males who are opting to not get married or enter into fatherhood.
Ah, that's the old bionic dance magically defining people into being part of your group to bolster its strength by numerical representation. Feminists do that a lot too. If you're against racism and sexism, you're a feminist. It's cheap and stupid when they do it. It's cheap and stupid when you do it.
Well, first off, I wasn't talking about political MGTOW. The MGTOW I put under the MHRM umbrella. I was referring to more accurately, men opting out of marriage. You refer to MGTOW being a few hundred guys on the internet. Well, it's a few thousand. Not that it makes that much of a difference. The MGTOW I was referring to, the non-politically active, the men opting out, those men are up in the millions. I thought I had made this clear. I thought I distinguished properly between the two, but I guess I should have worked harder to make the distinction. I also said all by itself it will destroy the feminist hate machine. Well, that's an overstatement, because it's oversimplified, and running on the concept being presented by the critical G, which was that if enough people opt out of marriage and fatherhood it would break a welfare system due to population reduction. I was simply presenting it within that paradigm, though I do stand by the notion that men walking away from fatherhood and marriage is doing more than men's rights political activism, and that's not to say that the philosophy, the education and understanding that springs from the men's rights movement isn't necessary. It most certainly is. Doing things like exposing the fraudulent domestic violence industry, pushing for men's shelters, and having men's discussion groups on campus, these things are very important. Now the next argument you had was something about a bionic dance. Bionic dance, what the fuck is that? sounds like a cross between doing the robot and ballet. I just picture Bender from Futurama in a tutu, attaching the label MGTOW to a group of people that do not identify as MGTOW, and brought up Critical's very good point that it's a bit like jumping in front of a parade and claiming you are leading it. True enough, and I apologize for doing that. It's just that in addition to self-labeled politically active MGTOW referring to the men who are walking away from marriage as being MGTOW, so do the opponents of MGTOW, so forgive me, I got caught up in the rhetoric. I understand the basis for this intertwining of the two. One could go as far as to say that the MGTOW philosophy, which can be a bit ambiguous, is in the hearts and mind of those walking away from marriage, every bit as much as those who have truly swallowed that red pill and self-identify as MGTOW. And I'm not going to get way down into that argument. I will say there is a big difference between the men who just don't want to get married and the red pill MGTOW. I'm still trying to figure out what MGTOW is. Too many different definitions in the specific details, and too much vagueness in the most broad details, in spite of many people telling me I am MGTOW, and meaning that as a compliment. I continue to define myself politically as a men's rights activist, because it refers to a goal, rather than philosophy or methodology, and grammatically describes best my goal, and that is to advocate for the rights of men, that is men's rights activist, or advocate. I really hate getting bogged down with labels and semantics. Anime Kirk writes,
1 hour and 17 minutes. That's how far I got before I stopped watching. I think you have a lot of good points, but you also have a wide smattering of women are this, men are this assumptions that you initially admit are just personal assessment before talking as if they are unmistakable fact. I especially noticed that you seem to paint female nature into being certain things that the majority of people find bad, while male nature is things people usually see as good. I'm not saying I entirely disagree with you, but I think in order to make your point more apparent you emphasize the negative aspects of femininity while also emphasizing the positive aspects of men that contribute in letting women get away with it, and in doing so you are making a mistake in my opinion. You are basically limiting the number of people who can follow your entire argument to those who are trying to feed the hate train. Especially with sound bites like men keeping women in check.
Well, the way I look at it, either I put women on a pedestal to avoid looking like a misogynist, and thus have no argument, or tell it like it is, and tell it mostly from one side, as was needed to present an argument.
I'm partial to balanced arguments that take the entire truth from both sides of the argument to make the point rather than one-sided, somewhat exaggerated arguments that mix the good points in with what could easily be construed as bitter rambling. That's one of the reasons I don't listen to La Bumblebee, because of how she tends to have all this hyperbolic rambling throughout her commentary. The stuff of yours I've seen so far has been light on that until this video, which is why I mention it.
Now this here I bring up because it illustrates a point I made in my "Is Misogyny Bad for Us?" video. Now, I don't wish to make fun of this commenter, that's not my goal, and he is certainly entitled to his opinion. I bring this up because of that last line. You are basically limiting the number of people who can follow your entire argument to those who are trying to feed the hate train, and this is why not running and hiding from misogyny, or running and backpedaling away from accusations of misogyny is good for the movement as a whole. In my video about MGTOW and marriage, I did express some positive attributes of women. I did give examples of positive women. I did dispel some negative assumptions about female behavior. I did mention that males typically have their negative instincts as well, but that these instincts have different outward appearances and the like. But overall, I did bombard the audience with many negative generalizations about women. I did so because it was necessary to convey my message. It was necessary to give an understanding to a situation. In my video about misogyny, I mentioned this. I don't think it is healthy for our movement to take a gender theory or a gripe off the table for fear it will look non-woman friendly. As a movement, we are going to have to be as philosophical as much as political, perhaps even more philosophical. And in being philosophical we are going to have to come up with a lot of theories on gender, and this is going to rely on a ton of generalizations. And a lot of these generalizations are going to upset women. And we're going to get cries of misogynist from our enemies, and cries of, not all women are like that, and we are simply going to have to ignore these cries, and ignore charges of, you're all a bunch of butthurt crybaby faggots and misogynists. We as a movement, are simply going to have to ignore that shit, and view people who make such statements as antithetical to the movement's prosperity. We simply cannot afford to have our movement turned into yet another fucking safe space for women. We as men are going to have to view this movement as for us by us. And we're going to have to speak openly and frank no matter how much it might offend women. Up until now, all gender discussion has been left to women. Men are only allowed to speak of women in glorifying ways, or talk about them sexually. So either I hold my tongue and not speak my opinion, for fear of upsetting women or looking like a misogynist, or I just say what needs to be said, to hell with accusations of misogyny. As for me generalizing about male and female behavior, well, what's wrong with that? All efforts to understand human behavior are going to involve making observations and generalizing. Perhaps there is a bit of science in comparing humans to other animals, and figuring out the behavioral differences. After all, humans are amazingly adaptive and complex compared to any other animal. But when differentiating male and female behavior, making generalizations and assumptions is all we have to go on. I learned a long time ago statistics on human behavior are often useless, if not downright misleading. As for the almighty infallible sciences, nope, sorry, shit like neurology can't establish cause from effect. That is, do people feel depressed because this is what their brain looks like, or does their brain look like this because they feel depressed? So relying on neurology is often useless. Furthermore, neurology is one of those sciences where it's commonplace for a corporation to fund a study in the effort to manufacture a result so that they can wave science in your face. And then comes the shocking headline-grabbing discoveries, that I have no doubt were made for the sake of grabbing headlines, to appear as if their department is actually making discoveries to justify their financial grants. Then you have psychology, a so-called medical profession, that borders on being a religion. When I was studying psychology many years ago, I came to the conclusion that any effort from this industry to understand human behavior has long perished and has been replaced with the need to jack up revenue for the industry. Furthermore, you'd be amazed at how many disturbing behaviors get a free pass if you can justify it through cultural conformity or religion. If you hear voices in your head, you're a schizo. If you hear the voice of God in your head, you're religious. If you claim you are married to 3 women, you're going to get marked down as having commitment issues and infidelity, and the psychologist is going to take it upon himself to call this an issue you need to work on, and tell you how unhealthy it is, right up until you tell him this is normal in your country. Then he'll backpedal and give you a million apologies. I'm sorry, but this is not medicine, it is not science, it's a money-making scheme. Biology is only good in telling us what our physical differences are. Any other effort by biology to differentiate men and women, is done by comparing humans to animals, which isn't helpful in this scenario because the closest thing to a female human is a male human, not a female rat, wolf, or chimp. So when it comes to human behavior, which is very complicated, adaptable, and controversial to speak of, psychology, biology, statistics, and neurology, make for a piss-poor understanding of what people are likely to do, and what their motivations are. So in the days of Aristotle we had observations, generalizations, and assumptions, to explain human behavior, and today, it hasn't really changed, it's still all we have. And again, I would like to point out, I am not attempting to ridicule commenter. And now a few comments from the ladies.
Your video was insightful as always. As a female I can tell you that every one of us growing up has had a moment of resentment, envy of men because of our period. I laughed when you brought it up. MRA discussions on female nature have undoubtedly made me more self-aware and critical of women around me and in the media.
See, I bet you guys thought I was full of it when I mentioned girls, without any social conditioning, become resentful towards males for their strength and ability, and that it really kicks in the day they are cursed to menstruate. And I am glad, my dear, that you gain insight and understanding from my videos.
Whether women are born evil or not, our current society sure as hell pushes us into believing that we are not capable, we are not to blame, and we are perfect little angels who can do no wrong. Society pushes us women to believe that we are entitled to whatever we want without needing to worry about a little thing called consequences. Is it part of our biology, or is it just our conditioning? I don't know. I hope it's just conditioning. It's a lot easier to change that than our genes. Also, as a woman, I will say that I had victim mentality rammed down my throat starting when I was 7 and was taken aside and pushed to tell how horrible my mother was to me. It's not your fault, are words that women hear a whole hell of a lot from every side. I was lucky enough to find a partner who was willing to stick with me until my eyes were open to just how shitty I was being, just how delusional I was, and just how full of bullshit my mind really was.
I won't doubt that a lot of the narcissistic behavior we see from women is a result of our culture pussy worship. I think your story is evidence that even if women are predisposed to narcissistic tendencies, proper intellectual guidance can wean her out of that narcissistic behavior, and she can reach higher potential. You are inspiring. And just one more note, everybody, the complaints I have been getting about enabling mobile device viewing, it's not an option. Anytime I put music in my videos, I have to acknowledge third-party content. The copyright holder has a set of automatic restrictions that go into effect. One of those restrictions on many songs is blocking viewership on mobile devices. There is a program some of you can download called User Agent Faker. Basically any program or method you have on your mobile device that allows you to tell your browser to identify itself as a desktop browser, will get around the restriction. Also, I'm aware that you don't keep ice cubes in your refrigerator, you put them in your freezer. I am just too lazy to go back and record over that part. Also, don't forget to add me on Twitter, so I can tweet at you, or tweet or whatever.